Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC Stargirl. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, Eclipso's kind of hit the rest of the team. Now it's time to hit Courtney and her family. Obviously, they talk about it earlier on, but Rick ended up... his hearing got canceled, so he's going to be sitting in jail. But Pat's like, no, sitting in jail is the best place. It's a safe place. But, like, Courtney's like, there's no safe place with Eclipso around. Like, there's this crazy storm going on, and we know what's at the heart of it, you know? So, obviously, Courtney's like, I'm going to work with Beth. We're going to go after Eclipso. We might not know how the JSA were able to stop him at one point in time, so we should be able to. Like, you know, Beth is able to at least use her goggles to see through the truth. The cosmic staff can hurt him. Granted, it's in a weakened state, but it can also break through his illusions. That's also why Courtney isn't affected, or hasn't really been affected yet. It makes you wonder, will he, like, directly come after her, like, next episode? But as long as she has the cosmic staff with her, well, there are moments she doesn't have it with her, but... like, the cosmic staff will probably come to her side, come to her aid, and, like, break her free of the illusion. So, going after her isn't going to be the easiest, but I think going after her is going to be the biggest challenge, and that's the point. Because I think out of anyone, you need to break Courtney the most, because she's armed with the deadliest weapon against you. Plus, she's, like, the symbol of this group. If you can break her, you can break everything. You can stop the JSA. I mean, that in itself is kind of, I think, the core of this, and that's kind of like the whole point to an extent. But obviously, we get flashes to the past. Obviously, when Dr. McNider's daughter was killed, and at the funeral, everyone's together, including this world's the Flash, which is John Wesley Shipp. I'm like, dude, that's so dope. He gets to play, you know, he's gotten to play 3 different Flashes. Obviously, the one from Crisis is the version of him from the 90s TV show. But now this is just, yeah. You get to play Earth 2's Flash, even though I think this Earth 2 is considered, like, a different continuity than, like, the Flash's Earth 2. This is, like, the new Earth 2. And you also, in the old Earth 3, which now is actually part of the Earth Prime universe now too, so, like, you know, so you get to play he's gotten to play the Flash, like 3 different versions of the Flash. But obviously this is about going after Eclipse, so I'm actually skipping over it because we learned about Bruce Gordon, and I didn't piece that together. I kept seeing the name Gordon and everything, which I just like, which immediately, like, Bruce and Gordon, and just like, you know. But regardless, it's I didn't put 2 and 2 together until, like, they're saying, and he'd start calling him Bruce. I was like, the little boy, that you're the little boy form that Eclipso takes, because he basically is like, yeah, you became a famous adventurer and explorer, I give you everything, you owe me. It's like, oh, here's the woman you love, Mona. Oh, the only thing standing in your way is her husband, and it could be you. You could have everything. You could have her soul, like the fact that, like, she could be yours again. All you have to do is put the gun down, because he was going to kill himself, but Eclipso pushed him to not, and he ended up possessing Bruce, and that's when he went on his rampage. And it was never really explained why he necessarily took that kid form, but I'm assuming, like, you know, jumping ahead a little bit, when Bruce died, like, you know, or maybe it's just like he figured, like, that was more the rambunctious form he needed. Maybe because if he took on the form of Bruce Gordon, like, as an adult, it would have made things too obvious. I am curious, did he actually take on the form of a kid? Like, did he do that to try and preserve himself? Like, you know, maybe Bruce kept getting younger and younger because of Eclipso, and this was the final result, and that's how he looked like when he died. I don't know if that's what that's supposed to signify, or whether he just chooses his form because it kind of plays into his, like, it makes people more willing to let their guard down, and, you know, or at the very least, maybe that's not the kid form. Maybe, like, he just took a kid form and he's using the name Bruce because that was the last form he was in. Either way, either or. Obviously, it's the JSA in the past trying to figure out what they're going to do. And I love that while that's happening, while we're getting flashbacks from Pat's perspective on those things, we're getting cuts to, like, everyone from Barbara to Mike to Pat himself being attacked by Eclipso, Barbara's in her car, which shuts down, and immediately it freezes over. Jordan's popped up, and she's like, no, this isn't real. This isn't real. You're Eclipso. He's like, no, like, I am real. Like, the fact is, you know, he's like, I found love. I fell in love again after my wife died. And like, we could have done so much good. Like, what I had planned for the country, I'm not insane. What I wanted to do was good. There was a part of you that wanted that too, you know? And so, but it's actually the Shade that actually reached out to her. It's like, Barbara, crank the car, like, there's nothing wrong with it. And he said, like, I need Emily. Because we learned in the past, the Shade talked to Starman about dealing with the Shade and everything. I mean, dealing with Eclipso and everything. And it's like, the fact that Sylvester had that meeting alone, because sadly, like, Pat just always kept getting relegated to the sidekick and everything. And so he wasn't party to that conversation, but it's like, right, why the Shade would give Sylvester that info, because even Pat's like, why would he even talk to you about it? It's like, yeah, like, whatever this thing is, it's true evil. Like, even he's scared of this thing. This thing's killed men, women, and children. And so, I'm assuming someone important to the Shade was killed by Eclipso, villain or not. It's like, right, someone important was killed by you, so you figured you had to turn to even your worst enemies, which is so interesting that you decided to help fight the JSA later on when the ISA came a knocking. Once again, it's like, our goals were simply aligned. I wonder, was he trying to get the Eclipso stone back then too? And I don't know, because he decided to come get it now. So maybe he was trying to get it back then too, but he just couldn't. And maybe that's the only reason why he worked with the ISA back then, was to get the stone. We'll hopefully find out more about this Emily situation, because he kept being like, right, you remind me of family. So I'm assuming like the Shade's daughter or something like that. Like, it's what, when he looks at Barbara, he sees like his daughter, Emily, I'm assuming. And maybe that's what that's supposed to be representative of. Because like I said, it's not like he sees a wife or a lover or anything. It's like, no, he sees family. So I'm assuming it has to be that. But other than that, you have Mike. Like, the moment Cameron came in, I'm like, I'm not sure. That, once again, it's like, it's probably super obvious. I mean, it's like, once again, it's the thing of like, with the nature of things, you can't trust anything that you see. But especially when he starts getting cold, I'm like, the way they were setting last episode up, I was like, most likely is Cameron. And I'm like, does he know the truth? And the moment he's rolling up there, it's like, no, you could go see Courtney. And it's like, no, I will soon enough. But your mom's not here. And then he talks about the dads. It's like, oh, you got like, well, how old are you? 15. Wow, you got like 7 more years with your dad than I did, you know, before you killed my dad and abandoned him, you know, left him for dead. It's like, no. It was an accident. And it's just, the moment he starts referencing his own dad, I'm like, there's no way your dad's alive. This is all, you know, in Mike's head. But it's playing, because I guess because Mike had never really given it much thought until, like, the whole Yolanda thing came up. Like, you know, that's why she kind of backed down, because it's like, right, he's not really thinking about it because he's a kid and he just thinks it's an accident. And I guess she thought, like, no, I'm going to stop this before I end up giving him a bit of a complex, before he starts feeling guilt about it. And he kind of does, because it starts hitting him of like, right, regardless of whether I meant to or not, I did kill someone. He's like, I didn't mean to. Like, he was just in the middle of the road and I couldn't slow down. But now it's like, it actually is starting to affect him, and now he is feeling guilty about it, especially like when it comes to Cameron, because it's like, right, like, you know, and then Cameron starts digging in about like, right, because the moment he was like, oh, like, your mom is like abandoned you, he's like, so that's interesting, because we hadn't really touched on that subject at all. Like, obviously we've met his mom in this episode because Sylvester came to visit her. It's like, oh yeah, I'm here to, you know, where's your ex-husband, Pat? And I'm like, so that was Mike's mom, so we hadn't really touched on that conversation. But then they're like, oh, like, she must have left and they must have gotten divorced, or they got divorced and then she ended up leaving. So I was like, oh, because that's interesting, like, because Mike has always talked about it was a big thing in season 1 of like Courtney and Pat being so close. He was like, no, he's my dad. And it's like, right, why he kind of got so uber protective like that, because his dad's all he has, like, at the time. Like, he has Courtney and Barbara. They're all good. Like, they're all like, that's his mom. She's probably more his mom than his own mom has been, sadly. So Courtney and Barbara are his family too. But like, that was kind of an interest, but he's like, oh, a friend told me. That's where I was like, okay, so maybe, because because I was like, Eclipso must have told him everything about, like, right, how to, like, hurt Mike, but also, like, right, the truth. Like, I wouldn't put it past Eclipso to do that, to stir up some drama, but it's like, the moment we're dealing with the Jordan stuff, I'm like, this is all faked, and it's all, I mean, especially when he kills Buddy, But luckily Courtney showed up and she was able to break the illusion for Mike. But like I said, at the same time, Pat, especially when Pat's like washing his hands and he just can't get the blood off, I was like, right, a metaphor of like once you kill someone, you can't wash the blood off. Because in the past, you had Starman coming to him about the only way to stop this is by killing the host. And the moment Pat's like, no, we don't have to do that. We'll find another way. He's like, you're right, Pat. But then ultimately, the JSA members came to a vote. Specifically, the ones that kind of talk about this are Our Man, Wildcat, and Starman, and even Flash about how to handle this. And it's so sad because like Wildcat's like belittling Pat because you're stripes. He's like, you're not part of the JSA. You've never had to be there to make the hard decisions when we had to do it. It's like, but also it's like that's BS because like he's always wanted to be a part of the JSA. You guys always like pushed him out. Starman always pushed him out. Always been like, no, you'll get your spot. And so it is kind of sad at the end of the day, like, it's only in this situation where he actually gets a vote. Like, the only person really against it was Wildcat. But, like, Flash, Our Man were fine with his decision. Even Sylvester fine with him getting a vote. But it almost seems like no matter what, like, it seemed almost like it didn't matter which way Pat voted. He probably would have preferred, Starman probably would have preferred if Pat voted the way he did. But it's like, right. If we do this, we're going against everything that JSA represents, what we believe in, what we're supposed to, like, you're supposed to represent, as Flash said, is like, we're supposed to represent justice, not vengeance, and so crossing that line obviously takes its toll on people. Like, obviously we've seen what that's done to people, like, over the course of all these different shows of killing someone, making that choice, feeling like you had no choice. Maybe there was another way, but they talked about it like, Dr. Fate couldn't do anything against this thing. It's like, this might be the only means of like, because I'm sure everyone else went at this trying to fight him while trying to keep Gordon alive, trying to save him. But it's like, and they won't know this, but Gordon did try to kill himself. But that doesn't make it any better. It's like, well, he was okay with trying to kill himself. Like, he wanted to end all this, so he'd be fine. It's like, no. Like, regardless, even if he gave you his permission, it's still like, no, it's our job as heroes to save everyone. Because even as Jay said it, it's like we be victimizing a victim in all of this. He's just another person corrupted. Like, this thing just corrupts people. It plays into their desires and just like that twinge of like, because there's like darkness in every heart, and this thing just like manipulates it. Doesn't mean someone's always going to act on like that darkness that's in them, but this thing plays on that. And like I said, Pat said no. But Sylvester votes yes, because he's like, right, my family was threatened as well. This is all about protecting their families, but it's also like, I get that, but this is a line, once you cross, there's no going back. And so Pat's like, no, because Jay was like, I'm not going to be a part of this, and Pat was like, no. And then Sylvester's like, get the call right. He's like, I said no, I'm not voted no. And he's like, right now, I'm like, which is severely messed up on Sylvester. It's like, you're giving Jay the opportunity to bail out, but I guess it's like you're making, because I don't know whether it's for Sylvester whether he maybe never explained it, but I'm curious, in his mind, was it being like, I can only do this if I know I have you by my side. You might not agree with me on this, Pat, but I need you by my side during this, because I won't be able to do this if I don't know you're there to be there for me, buddy. We're best friends. So it is kind of effed up that, like, regardless of his reasonings, he should have let Pat walk away, knowing Pat was adamant about not wanting to cross this line, because regardless if Pat participates, he's like, as long as you're not in the mix, it's fine. It's like, it doesn't alleviate his own guilt. It doesn't take away the fact is that he's still complicit in this, whether he took part in it or not, because he was still there. He knew what was going on. He couldn't, like, at the time he was like going to go in, because I think he was going to go, oh, let me see if I can stop it. But then he like backed down, because it's like he got, because I think in his own head it's like, right, they're the heroes. Like, I'm just a sidekick. Like, who am I to like go against Sylvester, like, or anyone else in the JSA? And the moment Sylvester comes out, it's like, the JSA never should have done that. But it's too late. It's done. There's blood on his suit, and Eclipso's locked away, and it's like, let's go. And so Pat's been holding that guilt the entire time. Obviously, and then like, you know, Calypso coming after him in the form of Bruce Gordon, and obviously like Starman, Wildcat, and Hourman being there representing that choice. Interestingly enough, I find that fascinating that those are the members that showed up too in Beth's vision. You know, I think that's maybe there's something to that, or maybe it's just a thing of like, right, they were on set at the time, so we kind of blocked like filming wise. I give you like behind the scenes stuff that might be like the justification for that too. But I just think maybe that's also supposed to be symbolic that the members who are just kind of like, oh, are you lost, little girl? Like, because of Beth, and it's just like, right, these are the OGs, and I feel like an outsider out of place here. But it's just interesting that you feel like an outsider, but maybe on it's just interesting that these members of the JSA who made that decision to kill Bruce Gordon, you know, and obviously Courtney's upset because it's like, you've been lying to me. But for Pat, like, because at the time when Pat and Barbara decided to keep this secret, they didn't know about Yolanda killing Brainwave because they didn't want any of the kids to cross this line. But now knowing like Yolanda crossed that line, now would have been probably a better time to bring that secret up. But at the same time, it's like, right, like we still can't because the JSA is one thing in your eyes. And if you found out like this group that was supposed to be heroes crossed this line that no one should cross, this code that was broken, then it changes everything. Because now it's like they couldn't find another way, so what hope do we have of finding another way? But there has to be one. It doesn't currently have a host, technically, not less like... Well, the last host it had was Cindy, so maybe Cindy is technically still the host, and they just don't know. They think Cindy's dead, but it's like, no, she's the host that it's taken over now. That was a lot, but it is free from the jewel now, so maybe Bruce Gordon never fully died. Like, maybe they thought they killed him, but regardless. But the thing Pat was talking about was, like, the JSA, like, never actually sat around the table again. He was like, they slowly drifted apart. Like, you know, he came back to the table every once in a while hoping that they would come back together, but they never did. They did when the ISA reformed, sure, but by then it's like, that's why the ISA won, because they weren't the JSA anymore. Like, the stain of what they had done, it, you know, regardless of if it was for their families, their reasoning for it, it changed things. It, like, they lost a little bit of who they were. They lost a little of their souls by doing that. And so that weighed on them, and it's just like being a part of the JSA was just a constant reminder of that. So ultimately, that's why they lost to the JSA, because they hadn't, it was years later, sure, but they just weren't the same people that they were, so that's why they ended up dying. What it, you know, their means of defeating Eclipso cost them their lives years later down the road. But like I said, for Courtney, it's like, you've been lying to me for weeks. What was my mom thinking? It's like, your mom already knows. And so at the end, Courtney's like yelling at her mom about like, how could you lie to me? And she's getting on Pat too. And Eclipso's smiling outside because he did it. Like he broke every member of the current JSA. It's like, you know, that's the thing of like, even when they won, they lost against him all those years ago. And now history's kind of repeating itself. Like, once again, like, I think next time he's going to specifically go after Courtney more directly because, well, she's kind of, well, the only person she can rely on is Beth, but this does change things. It's like, it's understandable why Beth, like, why Barbara and Pat didn't want her to know the truth, because it changes things. It like, you know, because he didn't want that on any of their consciences. Yes, Yolanda's already crossed that line, but like I said, at the time, they didn't know when they made that decision to keep the secret that Yolanda had already done that. Maybe it would have made her, I don't know if it would have alleviated any of the guilt she feels, but knowing like, no, like, you're not alone, like, but also, it's not going to make her feel any better because that's something she has to come to terms with on her own. The JSA never were able to come to terms with it, and they lost themselves. They ultimately paid the price with their lives because of it. They weren't the team that they were. They weren't themselves anymore because of what they did. So it's not like telling the truth would have made, I think that maybe that's a justification too. Like, it wouldn't have made things better for Yolanda because it's like, yeah, the JSA did what you did. So it's like, maybe it alleviates her guilt a little bit about, especially knowing the original Wildcat was a part of that, but also knowing like what kind of toll it took on them, that they never quite came back to being the same people, that they weren't the same afterward. you know, it almost probably make Yolanda be like, maybe there's no hope for me either. Like, I don't know. I think it'd probably do more harm than good telling her the truth. So I think that could be the justification for that too. But I mean, once again, it's like we've seen this amongst the DC shows of what taking a life has done. Like Oliver, like he's done that big time, you know, like amongst any of the heroes, he's done that the most of like taking lives, you know. And so we've seen what kind of toll that's taken on him. But the others, you know, have avoided that situation, taking a life and everything. The JSA did what they believed was the only option at the time, and maybe there was another way. Maybe they just didn't think of it. Maybe it's up to this new JSA. But to be fair, where we currently stand, the only people are Pat, Courtney, and Beth, and Mike, and technically Barbara too. But it's like, now like Courtney's family's divided, like when they should be coming together the most. Calypso, you know, destroy, and he didn't have to do much. All he had to do was make Pat confront the deep dark secret he's been keeping this entire time, and it was enough to kind of, you know, it's like basically he made them destroy themselves type of situation. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. What do they do now? What about the Shade situation? So many questions. We'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.